Now, let's talk about some stories that have been very popular on Chinese social media today, because we have my China media analyst, Kerry Allen, sitting next to me and smiling away. But the stories are indeed pretty depressing, because the first one is about this coronavirus in the city of Wuhan, where we've heard another person has died of it.
Yes, this has been a big talking point in China over the last week because there have been constant developments. People are afraid because they're not entirely sure at the moment what this coronavirus is, and specialists have said that they're still looking into it, but there are questions about whether it can be transmitted from person to person. So there's the report today that a second person has died. The person who previously died that we heard about reports of. Both of these people have been elderly, so Chinese media have been saying that they were vulnerable, and people aren't to be particularly surprised or really scared. There are 5 people who are currently in critical condition, and 12 people have been discharged so far from hospitals, but there are still a number of cases. I'm just trying to work out the maths in my head. It's more than 20 people, less than 30 people, who are currently being looked at carefully. There are hundreds who are being monitored, but they're not being held within a hospital and checked.
And another very sad story that we've been following and I wanted to speak to you about is about this malnourished student, Wu Kuayan, who has now died. What really happened? What do we know about the money that was collected but never reached?
Yeah, this was a devastating story. I remember working on it back in November last year. There were these pictures that circulated of this woman who was in her early 20s, and she was so malnourished because for 5 years she'd been living off 2 yuan a day, which the equivalent is about 30 US cents or 20p. She was only eating small amounts of rice and chili to support her brother, who had a physical and a mental illness. Their parents had died, and she was still studying at university and trying to basically pull both her and her brother out of poverty. And what happened at the time, last year when these reports came out, is that there were donations all throughout the country. People said they want to donate, they want to help this woman, and more than 1 million yuan was raised. But now that she's died, people are asking, how come these funds didn't reach her? Because the charity has responded saying that only 20,000 yuan of 1 million was released. So that's about £2,000.
And what does that tell us about the Chinese charity system?
Well, I mean, even at the official level, a lot of government media have been saying that there are overlaps, and there's a lot of question about regulation. They're saying that needs to be reform. There's a lot of questions just in general about whether, because social media is becoming more and more prominent, how many of these cases can be trusted, how much money, if there are, in the case of this woman, and there have been previous cases, if they sort of become online celebrities and they raise a huge amount of money, how much of that should be given to them and not to other children, for example. So a lot of questions being raised about this, but the fact that she's died, this is not something the government can cover up. So now this is why there's a lot of questions about this, and suggestions that there does need to be some kind of reform and better regulation.
And very quickly, a story that you flagged to us a bit earlier about the Forbidden City in Beijing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's Chinese New Year at the moment. It's the Spring Festival holiday. So at this time of year, I mean, since Friday, people have been travelling all around the country because it's the one period of time that people in China get as an extended holiday period. So they like to either fly to tourist sites or go and see their parents. And it's almost like Christmas. Everybody comes together and celebrates. And I know in particular, I've been to Beijing during Chinese New Year. It's the capital. It's one of the most popular sites, and one of the biggest tourist sites that you have is the Forbidden City, with the big picture of Mao at the front, and it's the former imperial palace. But there was this picture that, this has been blowing up on Chinese social media today, of a woman who had driven a 4x4 into the Forbidden Palace. And I can't stress enough, this was an imperial palace. So it is heavily guarded, and it appears empty, and she's there with her huge Mercedes-Benz, seemingly just taking a photograph. And this has raised a lot of questions. People have been saying, how on earth did this woman manage to get into such a heavily guarded area to take what appears to be a vanity photo? And what's happened now is the Palace Museum within the Forbidden Palace has apologised, and they're saying that an investigation is going to be carried out into this. We don't know much about the woman at present, so might be back to talk to you about that at some point.
Indeed. Thank you so much, our China media analyst, Kerry Allen, for updating us on all those stories.